Resin 3D printing or filament-based 3D printing? Which one is the best overall? Or most importantly, which one is going to be best for you? That is the question that I am going to attempt to help you out with today in case you are thinking about getting into 3D printing and you want to know, hey, which one should I pick? The one that has the liquid poison or the one that has many spools of filament? Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy and let's get started. Now, first of all, no matter which technology you choose to use, just know that even in a few short years, 3D printing has become so much more accessible than it has been in the past, and it's so much easier to get into. So right now, let me just start with the filament side of things. Now, when it comes to FDM 3D printing, one of the biggest advantages that it has is your ability to create large things at one time, because there are some printers that are quite big that will allow you to print full-size props or just an entire bed filled with multiple parts that you can put together to form something even bigger, and you can do it all at the exact same time. Now, there are some large resin 3D printers out there, but there aren't too many of them. And typically, when you see a resin 3D printer, you're going to find one that is sort of like a medium-sized build plate. You can make some large things on it, but it's going to be broken down into parts. And they tend to be more expensive than a filament-based printer that allow you to print even larger. So just keep that in mind. Filament-based 3D printing is also more versatile, in my opinion. Versatile in the colors that you can use, the materials that you can use, and what those material properties can do. For example, when we're dealing with these spools of filament, if you want something silky and shiny, you can get yourself some silk filament. If you want something that's really more of a dull, flat color, you can get yourself some matte filament. If you want your filament to just have a regular look that's not as shiny as silk, but still kind of shiny, you can go ahead and do that. If you're feeling somewhat exotic, or if you want something that's going to have a lot of really, really strong properties for functional parts or something like that, you can move on up to some polycarbonate filament. Or if you're really feeling daring, you can get some peak filament. Just good luck printing with that. But the point is, there's so much that you can do from those spools of plastic filament that gives you more options than you would be able to do with resin right off the bat. And if you want to make things that are more decorative in nature, like say this SpongeBob here, or if you wanted to make things that you could wear, like helmets, for example, or different types of like cosplay props, stuff like that, and you want to do it in different colors, then filament is definitely going to be the way to go, because you can print certain parts in different colors and then just combine them all at once. With resin, there are different color resins, but there's not nearly as many color options that are available as it is with filament. So I got some black resin here. I also had some purple resin. There's white resin, gray resin, you get different translucent resins, but you're just not going to have as much variety as you would with filament. And when it comes to switching out that resin in order to get the different parts to be a different color, it's a lot more work, because you'll need to empty out that of the old resin, clean it up thoroughly, get the new resin in, and then you have to worry about potential calibrations and what if something fails. We're going to get into the rest of that in a moment, but just know that it's so much more work to try to pull off, say, something like this in resin, as opposed to just doing this in filament. So let's talk about the ease of use of these printers. Now, fortunately, these days, printers are so much easier to get up and running. Gone are the days where you would get a 3D printer in the mail and then you'll have to spend an hour, 2, 3, or more putting them all together. Now, there are still some printers that come unassembled for people who are into that kind of thing and they want to do that kind of thing. For example, This Fulsom T1 Pro here came unassembled and I had to put that together, but that's kind of an outlier. For the most part, when you get a filament-based printer, it's going to be assembled like 95% of the way. Only thing that you have to do is pop on a spool holder. Maybe you'll have to connect a screen. You have to take out some screws to free the bed so that it wasn't moving around during shipping. Just really simple, basic stuff, and you'll be up and running in 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes tops. But from there, everything is just automatic. These printers, they level themselves these days. You don't have to worry about manually leveling with a piece of paper. You don't have to worry about screwing around with belts and trying to figure out why isn't this working the way that it's supposed to. For the most part, that's not going to be a thing. Now, sometimes there may be a situation where maybe your hardware wasn't as heavily scrutinized as the next printer that came off of the assembly line. Those types of things happen. But by and large, when these printers are shipped to you and you get them out of the box and you set them up, they're going to be good to go. Now, resin printers have always been just kind of basic. They all work pretty much the same way, and they aren't something that you have to worry about assembling at all. They are very monolithic in their design. Usually they're just tall, they stand straight up. The only thing that moves is that Z-arm that takes the plate down and then it moves up with each layer. You don't have to worry about tightening belts and dealing with as many moving parts as a filament printer. And that's one of the good things about resin printers is when it comes to maintenance, there's little to no maintenance that you have to worry about. As I said before, you don't have to worry about belts wearing out. You don't have to worry about greasing or lubing up certain parts so that they can run more smoothly. It just doesn't really work that way. It's very simple in how they operate. Really, the only maintenance that you have to think about when it comes to resin printers is the screen, because the screen will degrade over time the more you use it and the more exposures that it has. Some printers make changing the screen really easy. And then you have to also think about the plastic FEP sheet on the bottom of the vat. That would wear over time as well, and then you'll have to replace that. Again, some printers make it a lot easier to switch that out as opposed to others, but those are really the only real maintenance things that you have to concern yourself with resin printers. So what about when you want to start printing? What's the difference between resin printing and filament-based printing from a software perspective, from a computer perspective? Well, they are essentially the same kind of process. You go online, you find the file that you want to use. It's usually going to be a STL file. And then you just have to put that into a slicer. Slicer is a piece of software that basically just translates the motions that the printer is going to do into a language that it can understand. There's many different slicers out there that you could choose from. One of the more popular slicers is called Orca Slicer for filament-based printing. But depending on the printer that you have, some manufacturers have their own version of the slicer. Now, I'm not going to tell you which slicer you should use or which slicer is the best, okay? You just have to figure out which one works best for you, which interface you like the best, which one that you want to roll with, all right? But they essentially perform the same thing. You drop the file in there. There's certain parameters that you can choose to adjust if you want to, and then when you hit slice, it just tells that file, this is what you need to do and when you need to do it. It's going to be compatible with your particular printer. You send it over the internet to the printer, or you put it on a USB stick and put it into the printer, and then you watch it work. Now with resin, it's pretty much the same process. Now the slicers are different, but their purpose is the same: to take this file and to transform it into a language that your printer understands so that it'll be able to properly expose each layer one by one until it goes all the way up and finishes your completed part. Now, learning the slicers and understanding what the different functions do is something that you would have to learn over time, check out some videos for it, read some guides for it. But those slicers are the key ingredient for getting those files onto your printer. You can't just download a file off the internet, put it on the printer, and then expect for it to print. It doesn't work like that. You need to convert it first, and then the printer will know exactly what to do from there. Now, fortunately, these days, printer manufacturers have created profiles for their printers that are really good. So sometimes you don't even need to mess with the default settings. You'll develop some preferences over times for things such as infill, what kind of infill that you want to use, or what percentage of that infill that you prefer to use, or maybe some other little settings in the slicer that you feel work best for you. But when you're first starting out, a lot of the time, the default settings are going to be good enough to at least get you some wins under your belt so you feel good about what you're doing. And then as you learn more, you'll figure out what settings that you might need to adjust to get an even better result. And when you're dealing with printers such as Bamboo Lab printers, for example, and you're using their particular filament, those little RFID tags that they include in their filament automatically tells the slicer, here are the settings that you need to use to get a good result. And a lot of the time, those settings are going to work just fine. Maybe you need to tweak them here and there, maybe, but they work out so well the way that they have it already set up. So that just removes another really intimidating barrier of entry that was there in the past, but not so much now. And more companies are starting to do that as well. Not to the degree that Bamboo Lab has done it, but they're starting to ramp up by putting RFID tags in their branded filament in order to transfer those settings over to the slicer so that you don't have to worry about that part and that you can just get to printing. Now, when it comes to resin, we have a little bit of that going on. A lot of it has to do with the slicers. There's really only two main slicers that you use with resin printing. It's going to be Chi-2 box and it's going to be lychee or lychee or however you pronounce that fruit. And within those slicers, they've begun to develop a community that will assign certain parameters for certain printers and specific resins so that it could take a little bit of the guesswork out of you wondering, what should my exposure time be? What should these speeds be for lifting and retracting and distances and transition layers and all that stuff? They've begun to compile large lists of resins that you can just assign to your particular printer if your printer happens to be on the list and if your resin happens to be on the list, to at least get you started with some parameters that should work for you. Now, not every printer is going to be supported right now. Not every resin is going to be supported, but it is something that is available, and it wasn't there a handful of years ago, a few years ago. That wasn't a thing, but they're making it easier now. So even though we've got filament-based printers with RFID tags that can tell you what settings you should be using, there's not much of that going on the resin side, except when it comes to companies like Haygears. So Haygears has been a little controversial, depending on who you ask, because of the way that they go about developing their ecosystem. It's one of the only printers that you can get right now on the market that takes away your ability to adjust a lot of the core settings of printing. And by doing that, you will get in return a lot more reliability. You just don't get control. So their printers are designed to be used with their particular resins. You can use whatever resin that you want, but if you want the best results, you'll use their resin. And they have their profiles already built in. You just say, hey, I'm using this type of resin and I want this layer height, and that's it. And the machine takes care of everything for you. There's so many sensors and bells and whistles and algorithms that goes into the Haygears Ultracraft Reflex and the Ultracraft Reflex RS that makes resin 3D printing so much easier than it was in the past. And I've been using the RS printer for many months, and I have absolutely no hesitations to say that this is a dead reliable printer. And I can count on one hand how many failures I have had using this printer. It is that darn good. It is reliable. And that is the biggest selling point of that printer, I think. Now, if you want that kind of reliability, you also are going to have to pay for it. Even in a world where tariffs don't exist, that printer, the RS model, is still $1,000. That's not cheap. There are printers that you can get for half the price that can produce prints that are virtually indistinguishable from what the RS can do, and you'll only be paying half the price for that. And those printers are also likely going to be faster, sometimes even significantly faster than what the RS can do. But like I said, you're trading the speed and you're trading the amount of money that you spend in favor of reliability and consistency. And to some people, that is worth the additional cost. So now let's talk about some comparisons. So here I have some identical models that I have printed in both resin and filament. And we can take a look at them here and see the difference that you're going to get. Now, when it comes to resin 3D printing and FDM 3D printing, I tend to print things that are more decorative and fun in nature as opposed to things that are functional. And that also means that detail is going to be key when it comes to these models. And if you really, really want detail, resin is going to be the way to go pretty much every time. Now, as we look at these miniatures here, the resin ones are going to be the ones that are kind of grayish looking, and then the filament based ones are going to be kind of pinkish. So you can look at them up close and see which ones look the best to you. Now, these are all raw files. Nothing's been spray painted. Nothing's been painted. And you will see a difference between the resin prints and the filament-based prints, with the biggest difference being, if you look really closely, in filament, you can see layer lines in them. Doesn't mean that these miniatures are hideous and they're ugly, because in my opinion, they are not. But it is an option that some people have to take because they are not set up for resin. So just know that if you want to print different models and things like that, if you decide to do it with filament, you're not going to get as good of a result as you would with resin, but these days you can really come out with some very nice looking filament based models as well. And there's also recently been a new way to print models in filament using resin like supports. It's really cool. It's called Resin to FDM, and I'll leave a link in the description where you can learn more about that and the person who created it. I personally haven't tried it myself, but some of the results that I've seen look pretty promising, and it's another nice little advancement that comes from the community to help you get some better quality miniatures from your files. So let's talk about the cost of doing business with resin or filament. Now, starting off with the cost of the machine is going to vary depending on what the machine is capable of and what kind of features that it has, how big the machine is. You can get some good FDM 3D printers like the FlashForge Adventurer 5M still from Amazon for around $279 to $299, but you can also get some FDM printers that are $1,000 or more. You know, that's just how it works. On the resin side, the price tends to depend on how big the total build volume is going to be on that resin printer, as well as some different features that that printer may have. So let's just say around 500-ish for a resin printer that's not like a small resin printer, but one that can give you some decent build volume so that you can put together something like this T800 bust at like 1/6 scale, and you can print all of that out in about 3 to 4 different printing sessions. Okay, so let's just kind of start right there. But that's just the base model for the printer. What about the consumables that you need to use? That's where filament is going to shine, because if you've got yourself a spool of filament and you got a machine, you're good. You don't need anything else. You've got everything that you need to start printing and everything is good. But with resin, getting the machine and the resin, that's just the beginning, because there's an ongoing cost associated with this, because resin is hazardous. It is toxic, and you need to be able to protect yourself from it. Now, I'm not saying that if you breathe in resin without a respirator, then you're going to grow mushrooms out of your head and you're going to become a zombie. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that there's a reason all those warning labels are on the resin bottles. You do still need to protect yourself. And that means at the very least, nitrile gloves that you're going to be going through like crazy, that you need to continuously buy over and over and over again. You're also going to need to get yourself, you should have a respirator, and you're going to have to buy additional cartridges when those wear out for your respirator. Safety glasses, because when you are removing supports, sometimes they'll fly up and want to hit you in the eye. You don't want resin covered supports hitting you in the eye, so it's good to invest in those. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that you buy once and kind of forget about. You also need to clean the models from that resin. Most people use isopropyl alcohol. You'll need to buy that. That's going to get really dirty, so you'll need to continuously buy them. You're going to need a place to put your dirty isopropyl alcohol for when you need to exchange it for some clean alcohol. So you're talking about maybe buckets or just containers with lids that you could put on. You also have to think about the wash station. How are you going to wash it? It's a lot more convenient if you buy a wash station. How are you going to cure it? You need a curing station as well. So that takes up more space. That's more money that you have to buy. You also might want to consider some aluminum trays. Some people have big aluminum trays to try to keep the mess in one place. Some silicone mats that you can put down to achieve the exact same thing. There's just so many different ongoing costs associated with resin. And then you have to be responsible with it. You can't just pour this stuff down the sink or pour it into your yard. Anything that gets contaminated with resin needs to be properly cured and then properly disposed of. And if you are going to use water washable resin, that means that you have to do the same with the water. You have to think about, how am I going to keep this water away from the environment? Like, is there some place that you can take it to, like a toxic waste facility or something? It depends on where you live, but there's a lot more responsibility and costs associated with resin. But what you're getting in return is undeniable resolution and quality that you can't really get with FDM. So if you're only looking for like models, statues, things that look absolutely beautiful and true to life, resin is going to be the way to go. Just make sure that you have a proper place to use a resin 3D printer. It's not ideal to have one in a place where you're going to be eating and sleeping and congregating, and you're going to have kids and pets running around. Because even if you think to yourself, I'm going to be real safe about it, I'm going to be really, really careful, I'm telling you, over time, things are going to happen. You're going to get little support nubs that are uncured, flying in each and every direction that you didn't intend. There's going to be a spill that you didn't count on. There's going to be something that goes wrong. And if you have it in a place where you're like, hey, it doesn't really matter if I spill something on the floor here, I'll just clean it up real quick and no one's eating here, so everything is fine. That's where you are going to be using resin in the ideal scenario. I can't tell you what to do. I'm just telling you that from my experience, it's best if you have a nice separate place away from where you usually do all your business in order to use resin and resin 3D printers, because assume that everywhere around that printer is going to be contaminated and you don't want to intermingle with things that are contaminated from that space. So in the end, when it comes to which one is better, neither of these technologies is better than the other, full stop. I don't believe that resin is better than FDM or FDM is better than resin. Overall, it's really situational. I do think that when you print with filament, you have more versatility, there's more options, there's more of a complete product that you can get when it's fresh and off the build plate. And when it comes to resin, if you really want it to stand out, especially if you're trying to do something decorative, it requires more work. It requires a little bit of sanding. It requires painting. It requires time, and you have to put that time into it in order to get the final result that you want. So if you want something that is going to be more complete from the beginning, then filament is going to be the way to go. If you want to put more time into it, then resin is going to be the way to go. There's a lot of different properties when it comes to different types of filament that you can indulge yourself in, as opposed to resin, where a lot of it is just brittle. There are tougher resins out there that can handle higher temperatures and stuff like that. And that's kind of when you start getting into the more functional side of things. But if you're not really thinking about more functional or industrial uses, and you're just kind of like a hobbyist, or maybe you just want to sell some things here and there, then it's just going to be a lot more convenient, in my opinion, to go with the filament. So that's going to do it for this video, and I hope that you got some value out of it, and I hope that it helped you out. And if you want to see more of the realistic side of resin 3D printing, I have done some first-person view videos just to show you exactly how that type of thing works, and I'm going to leave a link in the description where you can see that, and there's also going to be something on the screen that you can click if you want to head over there to see what that is like. But if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below, and I will do my best to answer anything that you might have. So until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.